Yeah.
I didn't start taking anything till I was 30.
Really?
Yeah. Remember, I was drug free for a long time.
What's up, guys? Derek, moreplacemoredates.com. Today we're going to be touching on some things that were said in the Joe Rogan podcast yesterday with Ronnie Coleman. They touched on quite a few things, a lot related to his current predicament with all his injuries and whatnot. But on a positive note, it's really good to see more bodybuilders actually getting onto mainstream platforms because, this is such a, in the fitness industry, the big influencers and the big, famous bodybuilders and stuff, they seem super famous in our niche, but, in the mainstream, they're relatively, not super well known. So it's good to see them actually get, elevated on some of these like bigger platforms like Joe Rogan's. And, it was cool when he had Dorian Yates on, now seeing Coleman on, obviously super cool too. One of the things that's most notable, which obviously a lot of people have asked me about up to now, is when they talked about steroid use.
What kind of steroids were dudes doing back then?
Basic, you got, your test, D-ball. It's just basic stuff.
So obviously they touched on some very basic stuff, and honestly it wasn't very detailed. They kind of just brushed over it. Yeah, we did gear, the doctors prescribed it, blood work every 3 months. It was responsible. They don't touch on how it's irresponsible now really, but to that much of an extent. But, it really comes across as it was a smarter time, a better time. It was all regulated and legal and, doing it through a doctor, blood works, it's super healthy, blah, blah, blah. Not super healthy, but as healthy as you can do it, I guess. But the thing that stood out for me, and by the way, as far as the details of what he took, the dosages and stuff, if you haven't seen my reaction video to Tom Platt's interview with a bodybuilder who sounds and looks very much like Ronnie Coleman, but may not be Ronnie Coleman, and had his face blurred out, so it may not be Ronnie Coleman. But I would say there's a strong likelihood that it may be. Go check out that video. I'll put a card up in the corner. You can check that out. And it's basically where he breaks down literally start to finish his stacks, his dosages, duration of exposure, bulking, cutting, everything in between, the actual compounds used. In the podcast of Joe Rogan, they just touch on we use testosterone and D-bol and the basics. And that was pretty much it. If you want super elaborate details, go check out the Tom Platz interview I reacted to. But here, the thing that, it was very basic info, but the thing that stood out to me as interesting that actually justified making a video on this was the fact that he said he hadn't taken steroids until he turned 30 in 1994.
I didn't start taking anything till I was 30.
Really?
Yeah. Remember, I was drug free for a long time.
So if you go look at Ronnie Coleman's birthday, he was born May 13th, 1964. So that means 30 years later, 1994, May 13th is when he turned 30. So that means if you actually look at his competition history, a lot of people don't even realize he competed in Olympias. He wasn't just a pro that turned pro naturally, but he also competed in Olympias naturally. And if you go look at his competition history, you can actually see as far back as 1992, he was competing in the Olympia. So no, it wasn't his first showing in 94 or in 98 when he won. He didn't just show up out of the blue and win. He had been grinding for a while. So he won his pro card back in 1991. And that was totally natural at about 27 years old-ish. And, he competed for a few years, by his account, totally naturally. And if you go look at his pictures from start to finish throughout his later 20s up to his first cycle, it's so fucking ridiculous. So this is him at one of his first shows here. And he's already head and shoulders above 99% of guys you and I probably know who actually take gear on a regular basis. Then there's him at the 91 show, where I believe this is where he won his pro card. And he looked absolutely ridiculous. Going forward, I think this is the same show again, another pose, and this gives a really good close-up of the detail of his structure, just the aesthetic appeal, very close to what most would consider perfection from a bodybuilding perspective, and maybe not from an open bodybuilder Olympia winner perspective, but from what we would actually want to look like if we were, you know, high genetic elite bodybuilders. Like, we would want to look like something like this. I'm assuming most of you guys would, as would I. And there's actually video footage of him at that 91 national show, and you know, the detail and everything, it's just the mass, the package is just stupid. Like, there's nobody on this planet naturally who can even come close to this. And this isn't even him at his first Olympia. This is still him, you know, just a few years into training. So he started training for bodybuilding, according to him in the Joe Rogan podcast, around 24. He started like actually trying to bodybuild and, you know, focus on hypertrophy, I suppose. Before that, it was just powerlifting. So he's only a few years into natural training here. And the thing that stood out to me is he does actually gain, much like other natural athletes, the majority of his progress within that first, you know, few year window. And then the gains sort of, you know, taper off from there. So from like 24 to 27, he just explodes. And at this 91 nationals where he wins the pro card, he looks nuts. Obviously, like, I don't have to, you know, hype it up. You guys can see plain as day, this guy's physique is better than people who are winning their pro cards on fucking grams of gear. But you go forward, and this is another shot from that show, I believe. And like, again, this is just fucking bodybuilding perfection, pretty much. So in this clip that was taken, I guess it's, I don't know, some like news segment or something. They're doing a little interview of Ronnie Coleman, watching him train. It's from presumably 92, because they say he won his pro card back in November or whatever it is.
In his other life, Ronnie Coleman also commands respect. He sports a 54-inch chest, 21-inch arms, 30-inch thighs, and a 29-inch waist.
So consider the fact here, this is a couple years before he takes his first cycle, and he has 21-inch arms in this clip right here.
Unlike so many others in bodybuilding, Mr. Universe insists his muscles came from hard work.
I was born with the genetics, which is something that's genetics is God-given talent.
So he goes on to compete at his first Olympia in 92, and the reason it's not really documented anywhere is because, you know, he's considered as did not place, I guess, once you're in, I don't know how many people competed in this show, but I guess if you hit, if you're in 16th place, you kind of just tie with everyone for 16th, and it's not really noted. But like, some sites say did not place, other sites say he came in 16th. Doesn't really matter though. Here he is at the Olympia, and he was definitely there. 92 Olympia, presumably completely natural. So this is still 2 years away from his first cycle ever. So this guy, like, he looks from 91 to 94. It's not like there's a significant amount of progress either. So it sort of does reflect what you would expect. Well, no, definitely not what you would fucking expect, because this is just absurd. But as far as like diminishing returns go, there's definitely a very blatant point where he explodes, and it's, you know, like newbie gains for him, and he gains the majority of his muscle, and then he sort of like tapers up and tapers off a bit from, you know, 92 to 94 at the 92 Olympia. He looks pretty similar to he did in 91 from what I can tell. And moving forward to 93, we can see him in another show, not the Olympia this time. He didn't actually compete in the Olympia in 93 at all, but he did hit a few, a couple Grand Prix shows, a couple pro shows. And this one was in Germany, supposedly. I feel like the timelines on some of these might be a bit mixed up, but I'm just going chronologically with the information I have available to me. But either way, it's pretty obvious this wasn't after he really like cranked things up a notch after 94. So presumably 93 at some European show. I believe it was in Germany here, and he looks obviously very good again, but quite similar to what he did in the years prior. And then here he is training in 1994, literally within weeks of maybe starting his first cycle. So he would have been turning 30 this year, shortly after this video was taken. And the Olympia in, you know, September or whenever it is, his first cycle was probably for that show. And here he is doing 3 plates and a quarter or something for just easy reps, looking massive as usual, but not significantly different than he did in the previous years. And then he hits the 94 Olympia, and, you know, he looks as good as anybody who's like comparable to guys with hyper elite genetics on gear even. He already looks like them, and he hasn't even touched anything. And you know, you can believe him or not, I'm going to leave that up for you to interpret. This is like the phenom of phenoms. So I think it's plausible that he could be. And frankly, I don't think, a lot of people want to underplay their use. They want to, make themselves seem more impressive. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. Like, I have no fucking idea. Like, when I talk about, if somebody did something or not, it's based on me knowing of their genetics. When you have somebody who you don't even understand and they have some sort of likely like genetic mutation or something that's preventing them from having an inhibiting mechanism that stops them from growing correctly, there's like, the rules are sort of off in terms of judging this accurately. So I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and say, he was probably natural up to when he said he was. And this is what he looked like at the peak of his naturalness in 94. Actually, he probably started his first cycle ever for this show right here. This was the 94 Olympia. And this is where things really started to, take off for him again, because he had been, pushing the limits for being a natural for 6 years of heavy duty bodybuilding at this point. And he's been competing against guys who are cranking their minds out probably, or some of them might say otherwise, because in the interviews, everyone's really conservative at least. So who really knows for sure? But around the 95, 96 time is kind of where you see his physique he jumps from last place at the Olympia to within a couple of years, all of a sudden he's first and just smoking everyone. And everyone talks about, how he came out of nowhere basically. In 94, he came 15th. 92, did not place. Some people say 16th, some people say did not place. 95 to 97, he hit some pro shows. Then 98, he just shows up and just murks everyone. So, was he natural up to this point? I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. And honestly, it's really interesting to hear him touch on this stuff, because it doesn't even sound like he meant for it to come up in conversation. Joe was just referring to how his friend took way too much gear and ended up dying before 30. And then Coleman just, casually says, oh yeah, I didn't even touch this stuff till I was 30.
I knew a guy like that.
Yeah.
And he wound up having a heart attack. He didn't make it to 30.
Some people, they do it the wrong way.
Yeah.
I didn't start taking anything till I was 30.
So that's the progress of Ronnie Coleman from, age 24 to 25. He already to 27, where I think his physique kind of hit an aesthetic peak personally. And from thereafter, he kind of just solidified it, I guess, from 29 to 30 as a natural, as hard as that is to believe. And then thereafter, you really see him sort of mutate again around 32, where he starts to really start packing on tissue at a ridiculous rate again, and then just blowing everyone out of the water completely at around age 34, I think, is where it really, the biggest, most stark difference really, took hold. The difference between his physique at 34 to 30 is like as night and day as him from like 25 to 30. Like, that's how big of a difference it is. And for, somebody to progress at that insane of a rate, like, maybe it reinforces the likelihood that he's telling the truth. And I don't see why he'd lie. Let me know what you guys think. If that's, like, it's hard to fucking wrap your mind around this, genetic outlier kind of stuff to begin with, because it's like, it's so incomprehensible to like the average human that this could actually be a real thing, or that somebody could even look like this to begin with. Another point that actually just popped in my head too, that I've been receiving messages about too in the middle of this, is how he claimed he is 3% body fat in the off season and 0 point, like literally 1/3% on stage. And you know what, like, I don't think there's anything to really dig into about that. Like, Joe, I feel like, knows how ridiculous of a statement that is himself, and he doesn't really try to dig into it, because like, it doesn't matter. Like, Ronnie wasn't his own coach. He had, an expert helping him out. He had people designing his protocols, his nutrition, and you're getting a caliper reading or something that is not accounting for intracellular volume, and just counts even water weight as lean tissue. It's not going to be an accurate reading. The only true sub 3% body fat bodybuilder I've seen personally is Andreas Munzer.
It was negative numbers. It was -2.
That's so crazy.
-2% body fat.
That doesn't even make sense.
Obviously, Ronnie is in shape. That this isn't to take anything away from him, but a lot of people are going to touch on the whole, what a delusional guy, 3% body fat. He was not under 1%. And it's like, yeah, like, we all know that. And it's just like, this is just another one of those examples of, you know, a bodybuilder has such insane genetics. He doesn't, at the end of the day, it's just, he puts in the work and he does what he needs to do, but he doesn't necessarily understand it. He doesn't need to, though. That's why he had a coach doing it for him. So it's funny, I actually had a consultation with a guy the other day, and I started like, you know, rambling about the science and getting a bit too deep into a conversation about like mechanism of action and all these things to do with a prep that I was sort of designing for him. And then he brought up the metaphor. I don't even know if that's the proper word for it, but he was basically saying how when he goes to a mechanic, he doesn't ask them how the car works. He just wants them to fix it. I was like, I got you. So like, to me, that's sort of what I see Ronnie Coleman. It's kind of like he is the genetic phenom. He just needs the, you know, brain power to put him in the right direction. He doesn't need to necessarily understand the science. And frankly, you know, the science is overhyped a lot of the time, and it's good to work with somebody who knows how to keep you healthy and understands these things, but you don't necessarily need to understand it inside out to be able to reflect. You know, when somebody's asked you a question, it's not like you're expected to be a genius just because you're the genetic phenom who happens to have the physique that reflects the knowledge. It's just a matter of, you know, like, he's the one, he's the legend. It doesn't fucking matter if he knows that he was 6% body fat or if he was 3% body fat or whatever he was. Like, if you want to get to the nitty gritty, maybe he was like, I don't know, 5 or 6% body fat on contest. And obviously in the off season, you're not walking around, probably not even single digits, to be honest, maybe close to that in striking distance. But, you know, it'd be absurd to think that anyone's walking around at 3% body fat in the off season, but it's kind of an irrelevant point, to be honest. And I was considering making another video on it entirely, but I was like, I'm just going to throw it into this one because it's kind of like, I feel unnecessary to really like own in on its own video topic. But anyway, yeah, those were kind of like the main takeaways from the video I saw. And it was a good interview, honestly. Like a lot of it was talking about his, you know, his injuries and whatnot. It's really unfortunate to see what happened to the guy, but it's so cool to hear him talk about how there's no regrets and how his regret was just like not doing more weight, and just like, he doesn't wish he didn't do anything. Everything he did that got him to where he is, he's happy about it, and he's happy with his legacy and whatnot. And obviously he wants to get better. And I hope Joe connects him with his stem cell guy and that it actually does something for him, because it sucks to hear, you know, consistently throughout bodybuilding news, all we hear over and over is, you know, Ronnie had another surgery, this happened, that happened. And it's like, on the one hand, just on a token of optimism, I really hope that he connects him to the stem cell guy and he ends up trying it out, and it ends up being, it sounds like that might be one of the only, you know, unique treatment options that a bit isn't, you know, mainstream, that he hasn't tried yet. So hopefully he goes that route, and hopefully it ends up positively for him. And on another note, I guess maybe it's just a wake-up call to younger guys to just be cognizant of your training practices. Because I know when I first started, I would just go like balls to the wall. I'd try and do like max outs like every single workout almost, and try and consistently beat PRs, not just like a 12 rep PR with progressive overload, but I'd try and like max out on the bench press every single workout, just because you just can't comprehend logical, rational, strategic approach to training when you're that young. You just want to throw around stuff. So I think Ronnie is, obviously none of us are loading our joints with that kind of weight, but at the same time, you know, longevity in something that is literally breaking down your body, like your training is literally just damaging your body and then giving it the stimulus to repair. Just be cognizant of your training, because it seems like over and over again we see the patterns of the guys who trained smart, you know, like Jay, Dexter, those kind of guys who trained and they're healthy still in their deep 40s and early 50s, and are still muscular and still maintain good, you know, high quality of health and high quality of function and physiology and whatnot. And then the guys who really hammered their joints with the massive weights are the ones who are dealing with problems down the line in their 40s and 50s. And, you know, like Ronnie had no regrets, and that's awesome. But just for a lot of guys that, you know, want to have longevity and be, you know, like athletic, you know, functional for their kids and whatnot, I highly recommend you take a second look at your training practices if you're somebody who does really focus on the high intensity, low volume style workouts. So anyways, take from that what you will. Thank you guys for watching. Please like, subscribe, check out my blog, moreplates.com. Follow me on Instagram at moreplates_moredates, Facebook, Snapchat, BitChute, Twitter, TikTok, Apple Podcasts, wherever I am. If you listen to the audios, if you can drop a 5-star rating on the podcast too, that'd be much appreciated. It helps the algorithm there, as well as the comments here in the algorithm section are always really entertaining. It's kind of like, oh, it's like a second thing, a second piece of entertainment after the video, I feel like, to go down to the comment section and see how unique the algorithm comments are. Other than that, if you want to support the channel, you can check out anything I'm associated with, video description below, my TRT clinic. If you are somebody who is seeking hormone optimization, or you feel you would benefit from having intelligent patient care coordinators and doctors evaluate your hormone profile and see if you have any imbalances or deficiencies that may need addressing or optimizing, I recommend you reach out to them. It's free to talk to them. And if you end up proceeding and you get your bloods done, they take a look at them and feel you would benefit from some sort of medical intervention, you can get a $50 off your first order with the coupon code MPMD50. If you want to support the Nootropics and pre-workout brand, these are my own formulas. I write from scratch on a Word document. I compel you, just pull out your pre-workout now, compare the label to mine. And, I think it's pretty transparent. All the dosages are laid out, and I recommend you switch, to be honest. It's not just biased because it's my product, obviously, but I mean, just compare the formulas and you'll see why I recommend it in every single video pretty much now. And I'm trying to get better at plugging my stuff. I used to never plug anything, and people didn't even know I had a company. I would just, put in the video description. People would be like, what the hell's Gorilla Mind? And I'd be like, you don't know? I put it in every single video, but I don't talk about my stuff enough, apparently. So anyways, check that out. And then anything else I'm associated with, video description below as well. Thank you guys for watching. Talk to you soon.